Denmark and US have signed a defense agreement that will allow US soldiers and military equipment to be based on Danish soil. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Rasmussen and Secretary of State Antony Blinken signed the agreement at Department of State on 21st December. The 10-year agreement was announced after the United States signed similar agreements with Finland and Sweden this month. The agreement would mean that American soldiers and equipment can be permanently stationed on Danish soil. The agreement, which Denmark and the United States began negotiating in February last year, will enter into force when necessary legislation has been adopted about a year after the signing of agreement. Finland on December 18 signed a defense cooperation agreement with the United States to grant the US military boat access across the Nordic country to the vicinity of its 1340-kilometer border with Russia. Sweden signed a similar agreement earlier in December, and Norway, which also shares a short border with Russia in 2021, signed an agreement with the United States on how to regulate US military activity on its soil. The relationship of Denmark with Russia has increasingly strained after the breakup of Soviet Union in 1991, who were trading partners then.
First, let me just say I'm so delighted to welcome Foreign Minister Rasmussen here to the State Department, to the United States, and for this, I think, very important occasion. We've had the opportunity, Lars and I, to spend a fair bit of quality time at NATO and other places, but it's particularly good to have you here in Washington. For nearly 75 years, the United States and Denmark have been close security partners and NATO allies. Our forces are working to protect communities from terror in the Sahel. We're upholding freedom of navigation in the Straits of Hormuz. We're strengthening deterrence together in the Baltics. Denmark continues to play a leading role in ensuring Putin's war on Ukraine remains a strategic failure. It was one of the first countries to commit to supplying F-16s to Ukraine and to train Ukrainian pilots to fly them. Earlier this month, Denmark pledged to provide $1 billion worth of tanks, drones, ammunition, and to jointly fund the donation of new Swedish armored personnel carriers, all of which will help Ukraine defend its territory and its democracy. Our countries together are committed to enabling Ukraine to stand on its own strongly, militarily, economically, democratically. That's why President Biden's supplemental budget request is so critical and why we'll continue to work with Congress to pass it. The Defense Cooperation Agreement that we're about to sign will further strengthen security collaboration between our two countries. When it takes effect, our militaries will be able to coordinate more effectively, even more effectively than they already are. Our troops will train together more seamlessly and more often. We'll enhance NATO's interoperability, allowing our alliance to better safeguard peace and stability for people all across the continent. Today's agreement builds on the work that we've done to deepen defense cooperation with allies across the Atlantic, from northern to southern Europe, from the Baltics to the Black Sea. In 2021, we signed a defense cooperation agreement with Norway. Earlier this month, we signed a similar accord with Sweden. Earlier this week, we signed one with Finland. Collectively, these agreements underscore the shared commitment by the United States and our European partners to bolster European and transatlantic security. Denmark remains an essential partner in this effort. Lars and I will have a chance to sit down after we sign this agreement to go through the many issues and the many areas where the United States and Denmark together are dealing with the challenges of our time. We could not be more grateful to have such a strong, such a valued, such an important partner. It gives me a great source of confidence as we head into the future, knowing that our two countries not only remain strongly allied, but after today, even stronger.
In 2022, Denmark was one of the nations that imposed sanctions on Russia, whereas Russia designated Denmark as an unfriendly nation. If we go back in recent history, on 27 May 2008, Russia and Denmark signed visa agreements. While Denmark did not negotiate a free trade agreement with Russia, the self-governing Faroe Islands did enter into a free trade agreement with Russia after negotiations in early 2000. Both Faroe Islands and Soviet Union had a fisheries agreement dealing with their bordering oceans, and fish stocks was already reached in 1977. A similar agreement was later reached with Russia. In June 2014, Russian military planes practiced a missile attack on the Danish island of Bornholm, according to Danish intelligence service. In August 2014, the Danish government announced that it would contribute to NATO's missile defense shield by equipping one or more of its brigade with the specific radar capacity. This was shortly after the Russia-Ukrainian war began and amid growing tensions between Russia and NATO. On 22nd March 2015, the Russian ambassador to Denmark, Mikhail Vanin, warned about the consequences of Denmark joining US-led missile defense. In an interview, he said, "If this happens, Danish warships become targets for Russian nuclear missiles." Denmark, however, said that the development was not aimed at Russia. The Danish Air Force has increasingly had to deploy to deter Russian military planes from entering Danish airspace, with tens of incidents each year and peaks of activity in 2014 and from 2022. After the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine started, Denmark, along with other European Union countries, imposed sanctions on Russia, and Russia added all European Union countries to the list of unfriendly nations.
Tony, you and I are from the same generation. We are almost the same age. We have seen history unfold at the same time in our lives. And perhaps that is why we both firmly believe in the transatlantic bond and a close alliance between Europe and the United States. Denmark and the United States are close friends and close allies, and now we are taking our security cooperation to the next level. The Defense Cooperation Agreement is an important agreement that will bolster our bilateral security and defense cooperation. It will also enhance our cooperation in NATO and in the Nordic region. And as you just mentioned, you have made similar agreements with our Nordic friends, and we are looking very much forward to welcoming our close Nordic neighboring country, Sweden, to NATO sooner rather than later. And this defense agreement is a stepping stone towards a more secure Nordic region. It is a part of a puzzle we have made during the last couple of years, enhancing our defense budget, welcoming new members to the NATO alliance, and now these bilateral agreements. It will strengthen European and transatlantic security at a defining moment in history where we need it the most. Mr. Secretary, we are facing multiple crises. Russia is still waging a brutal war on the European continent, terror in Israel, a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and we both know that peace and stability cannot be taken for granted. And in time like this, friends must stick together, and that is what we are doing with this agreement.
The self-governing Faroe Islands, which are not part of the European Union, implemented similar sanctions on Russia. In April 2022, Denmark expelled 15 Russian diplomats from Denmark, and the following month, Russia expelled 4 Danish diplomats and 3 other Danish embassy workers from Russia. Relative to its GDP, Denmark was one of the nations that donated most of the Ukraine combined military and humanitarian aid following the Russian invasion in 2022. Thanks for watching National Defense. Jai Hind, Bande Mataram.